Cassidy, thank you. Saturday, April 22, so a week from tomorrow, is Earth Day. In recognition of Earth Day, we are presenting in today's program a genuine authority on climate change, Hunter Lovins. Many of you will remember that Hunter was here about 4 years ago to talk with us about climate change. But there have been a great many developments, both in science and in public policy on this subject since then. So we thought it would be good to have Hunter Lovins back to give us a needed refresher. Hunter Lovins is an internationally known and respected environmentalist, author, and proponent of sustainable development. She has consulted with and for various heads of state around the world and a great number of governmental agencies abroad and at home. She is the author or co-author of 16 books and hundreds of articles. Her best-known work is a book called Natural Capitalism, which has been translated into more than 35 languages. Newsweek magazine has called her an icon of sustainable business, and Time magazine has called her a hero of the planet, which she surely is. Please welcome Hunter Lovins.
And if we can have it up. Perfect. Really, no kidding, folks, we're in trouble. And the international answer to this is the cops. No, not these cops, as much as we love them. Conference of Parties. This is a device that the United Nations created in 1992, the first Rio Earth Summit, where they put forth the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, signed by 154 nations, now considerably more. You want that closer? Okay. In which the parties that agreed pledged to stabilize their carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, at 1990 levels by 2000. We did not. The Framework Convention on Climate Change entered force in '94 in order to prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the Earth's climate system. It failed. And in the 30 years that we have been having these COPs, Conference of Parties, emissions have doubled. Why? In part because many of the parties are essentially oil wells with the right to issue passports. Every day that Saudi delays action on climate change, it makes $1 billion. This guy, the guard to the Saudis that you saw exiting the car, yes, those are double Uzis strapped to his hip. At the most recent COP at Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, this is Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the Egyptian president of the COP, flanked by the oil countries. Guterres said, humanity has a choice, cooperate or perish, that the gases keep growing, Global temperatures keep rising, planet fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We're on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. And immediately thereafter, the president of the Emirates, which is the nation which is going to host the next COP, said that we were going to continue to produce fossil fuels and export them as long as there is a need. In Egypt, at Sharm el-Sheikh, the Saudis had not only a pavilion inside of the UN Blue Zone, but their very own pavilion outside of it. Their pavilion inside the UN Blue Zone was not terribly well attended. The situation we're in is a crisis. We know that here in Boulder County. In the last couple of years, we had the East Troublesome Fire, the Cameron Peak Fire, the Calwood Fire, the Marshall Fire. I know this very well because I ride for CJ. I ride for the Boulder County Sheriff's Mounted Patrol. We get called out every time there's one of these fires to go rescue animals. We were the ones who rescued Willie the horse from the Marshall Fire and were awarded the Sheriff's Challenge Coin for that. Here's the problem we're facing. We are pouring greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and very little of it is getting put into sinks, being taken out of the atmosphere. It's a bathtub that's overflowing. We and China are the leading problems. Our emissions continue to grow. The Europeans and almost everybody else are starting to stabilize. Now, before you feel too guilty about this, 2/3 of all of the emissions of all times are from 70 entities. You're not the problem. We do know who the problem is. But collectively, if we don't solve this, here's what we're looking at. Business as usual, we're going to a 4°C world. That's 4 degrees Celsius additional warmth over the pre-industrial level. Anybody know where we're at now? How much warming have we had since the pre-industrial level? 1, you're right, 1 degree. All of the impacts we are seeing today, things like the Marshall Fire. I mean, we've had fire for forever. We had 115 mile-per-hour winds that day at the end of December. And we had had no snow. Of course, we had a foot of snow the next day. It's Colorado. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute. If we did what the nations pledged to do when the COP met in Paris in 2015, we're at a 3°C increase in warming. The UN's target is a 2°C. We're at 1. 2 is too high. 2 is unsurvivable. And in fact, what we ought to be doing is going backwards. Well, we went backwards in a way. In last November, a bunch of us went off to Egypt, to Sharm el-Sheikh. Egypt's an interesting place, great place to go see pyramids, but let's face it, it's a police state. While we were there, we were watched. The cab drivers were security officials. This guy, these 2 guys, this guy, everywhere you went, there would be, I really felt bad for these guys. I mean, we're here to try to negotiate a climate agreement, not to blow anything up, and these guys spent 24 hours a day standing, half of that day standing in the Egyptian sun. What were they waiting for? And if they were really scared, why didn't they have a drone and radios? Anyway, almost 50,000 of us came to Sharm el-Sheikh for, and I apologize for the French, a shit show. This is literally a river of shit flowing in the UN's Blue Zone. To get into the Blue Zone, you have to be specially badged by the UN. The sewers exploded into the UN meeting rooms. And speakers like the ex-CEO of British Petroleum, and of course the usual parade of indigenous people, a few courageous souls protesting, very fancy pavilions. The Egyptian pavilion was sheathed in onyx. Somewhat less fancy pavilions. This is the European Union's pavilion made out of pallets. And then, of course, the NGO pavilions. Yeah, I was there giving speeches, meetings, press conferences. We put on a 3-day symposium with Heliopolis University. We also, with the help of a marvelous Egyptian organization called Sechem, rented a villa with a garden, and every evening put on a series of dialogues. This became the place to be in Sharm. This was put together by a group I work with called Now Partners, looking for solutions. The negotiations failed, predictably. They always fail, predictably. What's frustrating is we know what to do. We can solve the climate crisis with 2 things. You stop emissions. You do that with renewable energy and energy efficiency. And then you take the excess carbon out of the air and put it where it belongs, which is back in the soil. Can this be done? Can we afford it? Yeah, Dr. Mark Jacobson at Stanford has shown that we can power the entire world with wind, water, and solar. Cal Berkeley came out with a report 2 years ago. By 2035, the US can be 90% renewably powered, and it would save us about $1 trillion a year. Why? Credit Suisse just came out with this report. By 2025, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, so named, solar will be at 1 cent a kilowatt hour. 1 cent a kilowatt hour. It's 4 cents to 6 cents a kilowatt hour just to run an existing gas plant. 6 to 10 cents to run a coal plant. Half the solution to the climate crisis is to do what's cost effective, which is to shift to renewable energy. The other half is to take the excess carbon out of the air, put it back in the soil using regenerative agriculture. This is a paper by a guy named Greg Ritalik, who showed that 60 million years ago, the Earth was at 1,000 parts per million concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're now at about 420. When humans evolved, we were at 280. But the Earth was much higher before. Where'd the carbon go? And there are all these theories, oh, the Himalayan uplift, volcanoes. Ritalik showed no. What decarbonized the planet were little grazing animals, initially pre-horses, and then evolving into the vast herds, in this country, bison, in Africa, wildebeests, zebras, in Asia, saiga antelope, billions on billions of grazing animals that nibbled the grass at the edge of the forests. At 1,000 parts per million, the Earth was carpeted in forests, which is to say planting trees is not the answer. Grass is the answer. Grass grazed in ways that mimic the way nature decarbonized the planet. This is a perennial wheat, Kernza, developed by the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. See how deep the roots are? When something eats that, or you mow it because you're taking the wheat to, in the case of Patagonia, make beer out of it, carbon goes down the roots into the soil. When a cow eats grass, a horse eats grass, a pig eats grass, a chicken eats grass, the roots slough polysaccharides, sugars. That feeds the microbiological community, particularly the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, which mineralizes the carbon. That's why when the pioneers came across the Great Plains, they found 10 feet of thick black soil. It got there because of grazing animals. Fast forward to last December and the Marshall Fire. Had we done this kind of holistic grazing on all the ground out there, There would have been no fire because the grass would have been eaten down. This is a technique that we can use here in Boulder County, can be used anywhere to profitably put carbon back in the soil, and in the case of wildfire, mitigate against wildfire. It is also one of the best ways to lift people out of poverty. One thing did come out of Egypt. At our dialogues, this man, Helmi Abulesh of Shechem, announced a program to help Egyptian farmers convert from industrial agriculture to regenerative agriculture. He calculates that this plus tree planting plus helping the farmers convert from diesel pump sets to solar will be the equivalent of 20 tons of carbon per acre per year taken out of the atmosphere. That's pretty cool. And if you want to be a part of it, you can go online, SEKEM, and you can buy your carbon credits through Shechem, and you're helping some of the poorest people on the planet get out of poverty and sequestering carbon. So, we were all at Paris, we were all at Katowice, we were all at Glasgow. This December, for my sins, I will be in Dubai, the Disneyland of all cops. I am told this is going to be the extravaganza of all time. And once again, it will fail. Why do I go? It is the world's climate party. It is where everyone in the world that works on climate comes together, and so it's a target-rich environment. It is the opportunity to do things like the solutions dialogues that Now Partners puts on. And to me, it's the opportunity to talk to people about the fact that we know what to do. Renewable energy, regenerative agriculture. And to pose the question of what kind of a world do we want to live in? We can build a finer future. We can build a world that works for everyone. And what I really did at the last COP was begin to incubate a new program with a very senior UN official that we believe will be the alternative to the COP process. It's very tempting to say, what can I do? I'm just one person, said 8 billion people. If you're interested, stay in touch. This is a program that Rotary could be very helpful in. Thank you. Happy Earth Day. And with that, if there's time for questions, if anybody has any.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. One of the questions I had was just on the renewable side of things. I'm one of those people with the Tesla and the solar power on my house and all of that, but I also recognize that there's mining that has to happen to get those metals to create those batteries. I've got an uncle that's a professor at UC Irvine that says that there are some challenges with the megapack batteries and really being able to hold the amount of power that you would need to use all the renewables as our battery source through the night, et cetera. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. You know, we hear a lot about there's not enough charging facilities for electric cars to be everywhere, and I'm just wondering if you could kind of speak to the path forward and how we can get there.
Sure. The devil is always in the details, and we are going to get to solve a lot of challenges along the way. You've introduced 3 or 4 of them. The materials that are needed for the transition. This has been calculated. There's a guy named Dr. Christian Breyer at St. Gallen in Switzerland who has walked through everything that it will take to power the world just with photovoltaics. And there is plenty. If we're part of a circular economy where we recycle what we no longer need in service. So I have a student right now who is putting together a solar panel recycling company. There are, biochar now up in Mead has found that you can biochar the wind turbine blades. That becomes carbon, you put it in the ground, you're sequestering carbon. The batteries are very recyclable. Now, building the facilities to do that is part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's job creation. So all of this is a process of operating a transition. This happened when we switched from horses to cars. We had to build all the infrastructure that cars needed, everything from roads to gas stations to fossil fuel refining. This is what humans do. We entrepreneur, we come up with new solutions. So can we flip a switch today and be 100% renewable? No. Can we do it by 2035? Yes. Can we do it by 2030 if we got serious about it? That's Mark Jacobson's studies are entirely powered by sun, wind, and water by 2030. So yes, you do have to solve those problems. I drive a Leaf. It's fueled by the 5 kilowatt solar array I have on the ranch and Simplify batteries, which live in my garage. Distributed generation is probably the best way to go. Then you don't need the mega batteries. On the other hand, the utilities love owning this stuff and selling you the power. So we have a choice, a policy choice. Do we want to encourage distributed generation with each of us owning as much of it as we can, or do we want to hand it over to monopolies like utilities? And you can tell which way I'd come down on that.
Hello, thank you so much, by the way. I have a question relating to sort of sustainable kind of like building materials, since I know that with so many people and everyone needing somewhere to live, that's the raw goods that go into that can be insane. And we see that getting more expensive too. Do you know any companies that are sort of doing pretty amazing or progressive solutions to building materials?
Lots and lots. The main building material that we're fond of using is cement. Cement is something like 8% of global carbon emissions. The Cemex plant up in outside of Lyons emits something like 460,000 tons of CO2 every year. It's the #1 polluter in Boulder County, #4 in the state. And we know how to make cement using things like hempcrete, magcrete that absorbs CO2 as it cures. Right now, they're a little bit more expensive because we allow companies like Cemex to pollute for free. It's a question of what kind of a future do we want to live in.
I recently read about the fact that the Chinese are using sodium as a replacement for lithium in rechargeable batteries. And sodium is like 1 to 2% of the cost of lithium, readily available. How do we stand relative here in the US in terms of producing sodium batteries instead of rechargeable sodium instead of lithium? Thank you.
There are a number of companies getting into sodium batteries and zinc air batteries, and there are about 5 different battery chemistries that are very interesting. Lithium air, which uses much less lithium. More power to them. There's a company here in Colorado, the name of which I'm blanking on right now, that is doing sodium batteries. That's one of the more exciting technologies. But it's a horse race between all of these different technologies. Part of the problem is today, you and I and the rest of the world's taxpayers subsidize the use of fossil energy to the tune of $5.9 trillion a year. That's $11 million a minute. It's very hard for these entrepreneuring alternatives to get traction against that kind of subsidy for the fossils. So first thing we could do, get rid of perverse subsidies. I'm a free marketeer. Let the market do it.
Right.
And I believe in the tooth fairy, too.
Well, that was going to be my question is, we know kind of who's standing in the way of us really making progress. How do we get them out of the way?
Very good question. Two answers. One, make the product they're selling undesirable. So this is something each one of you can do. Every time you spend $1, you're voting. What are you spending it on and with which company? So do you spend $1 and buy a Tesla and a few other dollars alongside it? Or do you continue to buy fossil fueled vehicles? Boulder is one of the leaders in the world in buying electric vehicles, and we should all do a lot more of that. The other is policy. We are blessed in Boulder County now to have good policymakers. And Ashley, who is sitting back there, is one of the finest county commissioners you could ever hope to have, and joined by 2 others. And before Ashley came aboard, there was a vote on would Boulder County continue to allow Cemex to mine and run its plant? And the commission voted 2 against 1 to deny the permit. That was the right policy to take. We can continue to do that. So part of it is us. What do we buy? What is our push from the bottom? Do we implement the solutions that we have that we know we should be implementing? Or do we just do business as usual? And do we elect the people to office who will make good policy? When you have good policy, things become a whole lot easier.
Thank you. Speaking of policy, one of the ones that we hear advocated is pricing carbon. I'm curious about your view on that and whether it's a political reality.
Yes, we need a price on carbon. Anything that's free is going to be misused. Again, I'm a free marketeer. How do you price it? I prefer markets, carbon markets. California did this. The Republican governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, put a cap on carbon, said to the 200 largest emitters in the state, here are your allocations, you can only emit up to this amount, and it will decline every year. Now, he said to the California Air Resources Board, create a market. Let those who are good at dropping their carbon emissions build tradable credits, which they can trade to a company that still wants to emit. Let the market handle it. And California, year on year on year, is one of the leaders in decarbonizing. The New England states have this as well. We should have it here in Colorado. We should have it nationally. And we almost did. John McCain, the late John McCain, was one of the advocates of this kind of way of pricing carbon. A lot of people prefer a carbon tax. I don't. Carbon taxes of any sort reliably raise revenue. They don't reliably cut carbon, because to have a tax that's high enough to make you feel it is politically impossible, which is why a lot of the advocates of carbon taxing call for it, because they know it'll never happen. But yes, we should have a price on carbon.
Do we have any more questions? All right, thank you, everybody. They.
Default.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
I'm sorry. The elephant in the room, it seems to me, is China. Everybody in the room probably has one of these. The jacket I'm wearing, clothes I'm wearing, my shoes, all sorts of things from China. They're opening a carbon plant, a coal plant every 2 weeks, I think. the slope of China and its hegemony, I think I said it right, advancing, seems to be advancing very much faster than efforts by people like you and me. I've worked in carbon capture myself, to the point that we may be putting ourselves at a terminal situation against China by being so good at taking care of our country and our small piece, basically, of saving ourselves from the climate change, and allowing China to advance willy-nilly, I guess you could say, at a huge pace to where they may be taking us over. That concerns me very much for my grandchildren. You must know a lot about that. I'd love to hear your comments.
I spend a fair amount, well, I used to spend a fair amount of time in China. I'm something called a Dedao master, master of the Dedao Academy in Beijing, Shanghai. China commissions a new coal plant every 2 weeks. They're not actually building them, or they're building them, they may not run them. Provincial governors can do job creation very easily by commissioning a coal plant. They aren't quite sure what else to do for job creation when the central government tells them you got to put all these people to work. China is also the world's leading deployer now of renewable energy. Much, much faster than we. Last year, China brought on more new solar and wind than the rest of the world combined, including the US. China is right now the world's leading emitter of carbon. We're number 2. So the first thing we can do is put ourselves on a path with, say, the Europeans, drop our own emissions. Doing that is cost effective to us, so we ought to be doing it anyway. China will cut its emissions for a very different reason. The people can't breathe. Something like 9 million people a year die of acute air pollution poisoning. Many of them in China, something like 4 to 5 million every year. The people are beginning to feel like the party is losing legitimacy because it's continuing to pollute. And so the people in China are demanding an end to coal. Now, in China, centrally planned economies have some advantages. You say, do this, and everybody goes and does that. So China is building ghost cities. Nobody lives there, but they're building them because it's job creation. They're building coal plants because it's job creation. They also are the leading buyer of electric vehicles. And you may remember a year or so ago, gasoline prices dropped significantly. That was because of Chinese electric buses. Dropped diesel demand worldwide. So what China does, yeah, they are the gorilla in the world in many ways. What China does will have an enormous impact. The best way I think we can influence China is to get our own act together and demonstrate to them that renewable energy is a much better job creator than fossil, creates 10 times the number of jobs of building a coal plant, and that we have a higher quality of life. The Chinese aspire to be like us. They see our quality of life and they want it. And I think the real question with China is how long will the party retain legitimacy? And that's a topic for another day. Thank you all so much for having me. I truly appreciate being with you.
Hunter, just wanted to thank you for that outstanding talk and the outstanding work you're doing. I'm Merrill Glustrom, and my wife Leslie is now working on reducing the discount rate for fossil fuel generation, which we could get into later, but she says to say hello, and to also thank you for the wonderful work you're doing around the world to take into account climate change and mitigate the worst effects. And we at Rotary, for a long time, have been involved with mitigating the worst effects of polio, and in fact, maybe eradicating it. And we are very, very close. And now climate and environmental sustainability has become one of Rotary International's main areas of focus. So it's the direction I see as our future. But in your honor, for what we've done with polio, we'd like to donate 100 doses of polio vaccine for you. Thank you.
The Service Above Self dinner is right around the corner. Saturday, April 29th, 5:30 p.m. at the Boulder Country Club. This dinner is our signature event that recognizes Boulder County residents who best exemplify Rotary's motto of service above self. It's the largest source of funds for the $100,000 per year that we give back to the community. Tickets are $150 each, and if you're one of those people who likes to wait to buy your tickets, then perfect. Now is the time. See Kitty DeKeefer, Sally Brown, or Mike Brady. Any of them can take your check or point you to the website where you can buy a ticket with a credit card. Don't delay. Now is the perfect time to honor others in our community, help fund the good works of the club, and have a great time.
Would you like a rewarding experience guiding high school students as they work together on community projects? You should consider volunteering as a Rotarian sponsor with our Interact groups at Boulder or Fairview High School. Interact is the high school club within Rotary, and each club has a Rotarian that is their advisor. Boulder High School meets every Wednesday for 30 minutes at lunchtime, and Fairview High School also meets for about 30 minutes on Wednesdays or via Zoom on Sunday evenings. As the advisor, you do not have to attend every meeting, but your presence and guidance is very helpful. The high schoolers select their community tasks and do a good job successfully carrying them through. The advisor's role is to be available for support or suggestions when necessary, but allow them to guide the ship. The club's leadership and members learn from their successes and failures. Consider being the advisor for either Fairview or Boulder High School by reaching out to Bill Rubin or Shoni Khan at the information that's on the screen. Both of them will attest that working with today's youth is an incredibly rewarding experience. Rotary Comes Home is a wonderful evening of dinner and conversation with many of your Rotary friends and their guests, generously hosted by several members of our club in the privacy of each of their homes. Our hosts choose the dinner theme. Guests choose their dinner preference. Rotary Comes Home is scheduled for Saturday, June 17th at 6 p.m. We have several spectacular hosts lined up and can easily accommodate several more. So right now we're looking for more hosts. Please contact Darla Sheath at the email up on the screen by April 28th if you would like to volunteer to host. Several of our members have formed a duo to host, so partner with another member if you would like. We will start taking reservations for Rotary Comes Home after May 5th, from May 5th to May 19th. Dinner assignments will be based on a first-come, first-served basis. If you would like to be a host, contact Darla Sheath. Earth Day is Saturday, April 22nd, and what better way to spend it than helping with a pollinator garden planting. Spend an hour helping to dig a few holes and get some plants in the ground to support our native bees and butterflies. 10 a.m., Fraser Meadows. More information, contact Meryl Glestrom.
When you think of Rocky Mountain National Park, you may think of the vast Never Summer Mountains looking down on the headwaters of the Colorado River, or the more than 350 miles worth of trails, 150 alpine lakes, and meadows full of wildflowers, wildlife from pikas to elk. It is a vast tract of wilderness. It's majestic, more than 100 years old, and a UNESCO designated World Biosphere Reserve. It's also enormously, incredibly, and irritatingly busy, with more than 4.5 million recreational visitors clocked in 2019, and more anticipated in the years to come. Next week, Kyle Patterson, Public Affairs Officer for Rocky Mountain National Park, will talk about the majesty and the challenges of keeping one of the most beautiful places on Earth beautiful, the land and the animals protected, and all of it open and available for the people who want to see it. Join us next week.
You know what I think we should do? I think we should all have a great weekend.